We've got a really interesting hand today between Mark Rumi and Gail Bowman, in which Mark Rumi gets something that we want to call entitlement tilt.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad. You know when you have aces and the board runs out like 4 to a flush and you don't have that ace of that suit and you just call anyway and you lose $100 and it's terrible and you hate your day? Well, that might happen today, except it's in the EPT. It's in a 5K buy-in.
Yeah, it's a little bit more, it's a little bit worse, and you can see it happen. It's like a slow motion train wreck for sure. This is from EPT Barcelona, and his opponent, Gail Bowman, was the World Series of Poker main event final table bubble girl in 2012. So you may recognize her from that.
Right, and we're going to break it down as we go, so get ready for some analysis.
Yep, this hand was suggested to us on Twitter by Runar Hansen. And if you have a suggestion for the breakdown, tweet it at us and include a YouTube link.
He's got 7-8 suited.
8.
Oh, I really thought I was going to get that.
The two-time World Series of Poker bracelet winner makes it 800 to go. Ace-king for Gail Bowman.
Most players are going to just call here against an under-the-gun raiser, but I think it's important to keep this in your 3-betting range as well.
She does just call. Action folded around to Leo Fernandez. He passes. Alexei Samkov on the button. Has ace-9. Well, that's a fold. Queens for Mark Rumi.
Raise. 25.
And he 3-bets from the small blind, makes it 2,500. Hartman folds the big.
Last time Rumi 3-bet, he made it a little too small. This one's better, but with 2 people in the hand, you would probably want to make it a little more. That way you keep bluffs in your range as well.
Kovalchuk got out of the way. Bowman calls in position. It's an ace-high flop. She takes the lead.
Make no mistake, this is a situation where you do not, I repeat, do not have to make a continuation bet.
Rumi does continue for 2,500.
Betting this flop accomplishes nothing. You want worse hands to stay in, which they won't, and better hands to fold, which they won't.
There's definitely some merit to what Joe's saying, but I do disagree. I think Gail absolutely can call with worse hands here.
Right. It's just that they aren't that numerous. There are a lot of spots where we call them game theory disasters, where you're only folding out worse hands and getting called by better hands. This isn't necessarily one of those spots. Gail could have easily played 9s, 10s, or jacks this way and call once on the flop. She could have 8-9 of clubs, 8-9 of spades, especially. Of course, she's going to continue with that. So there are some hands that Rumi can get value from. But to Joe's point, I think he could check also and be pretty okay with it.
Yeah, it's really fine to check. It's probably better. The one reason to bet that I can come up with that's especially strong is once you 3-bet on an ace-high board, that may just be a betting board for you, and I think that's totally reasonable, as a point.
A problem for Rumi, though, he is against a player who is savvy and knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
And Rumi, his range is really strong here, considering that there was an under-the-gun opener, a caller, and then he 3-bet out of the small blind.
Yeah.
So that range is usually only ace-king if he has an ace, and the rest of his hands are going to be pairs.
Big pairs.
Yeah. Probably Jackson better, maybe 10s. I don't know how this guy plays exactly. But a lot of that range is not liking this board, just like the hand he has. And if Bowman had some sort of air, she may be able to set up a play against that.
She might float once.
Yeah.
See if he bets the turn or not.
Right. But that being said, I think Rumi's playing it just perfectly fine so far.
Yeah.
It kind of sucks that Bauman has ace-king, and I think she's playing it really well. I like how she's playing it, especially considering depth of stacks. She started with 70 big blinds. She definitely doesn't want to get that all in pre-flop against an under-the-gun raiser's range, which is why she initially flatted.
Or the 3-betters range once someone's they're 3-betting the under-the-gun raiser. Yeah. That's not a good spot either.
Part of her good play is getting this miracle flop that is just perfect and super dry,
Yeah.
and it's great. But that being said, I like that she's just calling here as well. A lot of players would be tempted to raise.
Yeah, that would be a huge mistake. Actually, for the very same reasons Joe was talking about this C-bet, it's really hard to come up with hands that can call the raise unless they put her specifically on a flush draw. If they think she's doing it for value, it's just really hard to come up with the hands that she isn't chopping with.
Yeah,
anyway.
Yeah, pretty much, because Rumi's not really supposed to have ace-queen having 3-bet the under-the-gun raiser
Right.
here. And Rumi's really not supposed to have pocket 8s or pocket 4s either, which is why Gail should feel extremely comfortable with her hand at the moment.
Gail's got to believe she's essentially got the nuts here. She so often has the best hand that she doesn't want to scare away the little rabbit. She wants to keep that rabbit in the garden.
All right, that was a little creepy, but that's okay.
We do creepy here sometimes.
Yeah, I guess we do. Listen to the podcast. You'll hear creepy for sure. So Gail's basically saying, okay, I'm just going to call no matter what unless the board runs out terrible. And I think she's mostly hoping that no Broadway cards come because that's the most likely type of hand that Rumi could have that'll beat her, a hand just like he has.
This also works because she's in position, so she can make sure bets go in on every street.
Bauman calls. 6 on the turn. Rumi slows down. He checks.
Gale should be able to bet here. Not really sure what she'd be afraid of.
11,700 in the middle. She bets 5,200.
And I think queens are going to be good here less often than airline food.
Rumi ruminating.
I like it.
He calls.
I hate it.
And the river card is another 6, pairing the board. And Rumi
Oh, boy.
check called the turn, now leads the river for 5,700.
And I think this is a just call for Gale. Even though I don't think there's much she should be afraid of, there's not much that can call a raise here that she's beating either.
Wow, she moves all in.
How much?
And apparently I could be wrong. Again.
13.
Rumi. Buddy, you play this hand so strong and so is she. Do you really think she's running a cray-cray bluff on you? All she needs is a ace and you're toast.
He calls.
On the other hand, nice hand by Gale Bauman.
She gets a full double up.
Joe Stapleton is right. This is a nice hand by Gale Bauman. I cannot say the same for Mark Rumi. It is not a nice hand for Mark Rumi.
This is going in our disastrous mistakes playlist for sure.
Right. So let's talk about Gale first because it is a nice hand by her.
Yeah.
So we liked everything she did up until the flop. We talked about that already.
Mm-hmm.
Betting the turn is something you can either do or not. Against really good players, she's probably going to want to check the turn a lot of the time to keep their bluffs alive. But against a guy who she thinks might be calling too often, it's probably good to bet, and she can play exploitively against a guy like Mark Rumi.
I will say that if she's betting here at all, she probably has to bet this hand at least a big chunk of the time because she's right near the very top of her range.
Yeah.
So I mean, she can have sets sometimes too, I guess, but not even that often.
Right.
There's not that many sets.
But
to
the turn bet's not the best thing she did. It's the river shove is a really good play that not everybody would do.
Yeah, and it's balanced by the terrible play, the seesaw balance of Mark Rumi, where he decides to bet the river. I think the check call on the turn is really fine because, he's keeping the bluffs alive. But now on the river, when he bets 5,700, I'm not sure what that accomplishes, except it means he can't be bluffed off the hand.
Right.
He's sort of saying, you can't bluff me now.
We can try to break down what Mark Rumi is thinking when he bets 5,700 into 22,000 and Gale Bauman has 18.1 thousand left.
Yeah.
We can try to figure that out. It's really tough. So,
Yeah.
All right, let's try to figure this out. So he bets his queens.
Yep.
We know what the board is. It's right there. What are we getting called by that we like to get called by?
2 jacks? I got nothing.
Yeah, I don't think Bauman's ever betting
No.
2 jacks on the turn.
I
I
don't
don't
think-
think Bauman's ever betting 8-9 on the turn.
This is not a bet for value. This
No.
is a bet for fear. This is
Yeah.
a fear bet.
So
A blocker weird fear bet. Don't bluff me. I'm going to bet.
the hands that Bauman got to the river this way with that Rumi is currently beating are flush draws.
Yeah.
And if we're Rumi, we're going to want to check and induce those flush draws to bluff. And sometimes we're going to fold to that bluff because Bauman has a lot of value in her range.
Correct.
As well. But we at least want to give her the opportunity to bluff with her flush draws, right?
Right.
By betting, we're taking that opportunity away. And it kind of feels like that's what Rumi wants to do because he doesn't want to have that tough spot.
I agree.
So that's not good. We don't want to be doing that.
Right.
We also don't want to be betting when we're only going to get called by a better hand.
Yeah.
I can't think of a worse hand that's going to call us. This is a huge mistake.
No, I can't either.
And, okay,
When she can still have hands that we're beating, they just will never call.
The
So
bet is bad
bet
enough.
makes no sense.
the bet is bad enough, but
The call
then
is a disaster.
I cannot believe this happened.
Okay,
Like,
I will say this. I actually think he did have a very poor but a plan, which was I'm going to bet and that'll get me to the river and it'll only cost me 57 if I'm beat, okay. But she can only really call with her aces anyway, and then she moves in, and he does this when he calls.
that's what we call entitlement tilt right there.
Yeah, that's a sign of just, I don't care about plans. I don't care about anything. I'm not folding. This sucks. I'm sure I'm losing. I don't care.
Right.
And he throws away, 30 blinds?
Yeah, so entitlement tilt is when you had a good hand at one point and you feel like you're entitled to win the hand, so you put in way more chips than you should later in the hand when it seems pretty clear that you're beat.
Yeah.
And let's talk about why it's so clear that he's beat.
Okay.
I think the number one reason is price. So he bets 5,700. Gale moves in for 12K more. She's laying him 4-1. She would never bluff here. This is
Never.
an impossible spot to bluff. Nobody's bluffing here.
Agreed. Or if someone is bluffing, they're bluffing so rarely that you could fold 100% of the times in the spot with queens for the rest of your life and you make money.
Absolutely.
It's a profitable play to fold by a lot.
Unless everybody knows you always fold queens there.
Right, and then fine. Then you can call once and they'll see you don't. And you turn your queens over.
You should never have bet in the first place, of course.
Right. This is just terrible. If he's going to call and double her up, the way to do it is to check and decide to call on the river when she shoves.
Oh, it is much better. If he checks and she moves in for near pot, she's polarized then to a really good made hand or a missed flush draw.
Yeah.
And you can reasonably call that, although it's probably not recommended in general, but you could reasonably call that. This call has no merit. There is, I think, less than a 1% chance that she's bluffing here.
I think it's crazy unlikely. I mean, she is also not a crazy bluffer, aggressive person
this isn't
anyway.
Michael Mizrachi over here.
Yeah,
and
so
even he wouldn't do that.
I don't think he would. So I think actually we can probably fold to her shove anyway, if without us doing the bet first thing. But we bet she moves in. Let's talk about her move in too, because this is really nice. She's very aware based on his 3-betting range, which we put on essentially jacks plus and ace king, right? Yeah. That she's essentially never losing to him. She's free rolling him now.
He could have specifically pocket aces, which is a very, very small chance because she has ace king and there's an ace on the board, leaving one combo of aces.
So that's very unlikely. And he also played it in a very funky way to check, call the turn, and suddenly bet on the river. He could have it, I guess. But the thing is, when she moves in, she's got to think, I pretty much have him 99 point something % of the time here. It's hard to get called, but I'll just free roll it.
Why not move in when it's like you're almost always ahead? Because like we said, Rumi should never have pocket 8s or pocket 4s.
Right.
So, or pocket 6s.
He never has a 6 either.
So
he just has a lot of jacks, queens, and kings.
And he never has ace 8 or anything like that. At least he's not supposed to.
He can have, and maybe he can have ace queen sometimes. That's at least possible. And so we can get called by that. Why not move in?
Didn't expect to get called by queens, I'm pretty sure.
Stick around because after this, we're going to look at comments from last week's video.
If you guys want to see another true disaster of a play, I don't know if it's as bad as this one. Actually, it's probably about the same. Check out the Dennis Phillips disaster by clicking here.
It's gameplay-wise, it's probably not as bad, but in terms of the situation, the money that's involved, I think it's worse. Also, check out our podcast and make sure you subscribe.
Last week, we had a really fun and interesting hand between Mustafa Knit and Anton Bertelsen in the Dublin 25K EPT High Roller, where Knit did his very best to represent an ace on an ace-high flop when Bertelsen had queens and was just in the torture chamber as Knit bet the river and Bertelsen's whole world crumbled. And it was just kind of a thing of beauty, although maybe a little bit ambitious by Knit.
I mean, it worked out,
so
great, but we're not sure if it was a good play. But let's hear what you people had to say about it. First of all, Ben Spinello on YouTube says, the kind of spot that just makes you want to shoot yourself.
That might be a bit hyperbolic. We don't want anybody going around killing themselves, but it is a terrible spot for Bertelsen. It really sucks. I understand the sentiment.
Knit just flatted the flop with queen 9 on an ace 8-8 board when they were super short stacked. I mean, he looks like he has an ace all day. It was a great play by Knit, and it worked out. You need both those things.
And Bertelsen can't lie to himself and say Knit had an ace because he's seen this hand. He knows.
Yeah. It was on a live stream, so they knew 45 minutes later. It must have hurt bad.
Yeah.
Okay, Gray Face No Space on Reddit says, are there 30 combos of 9s to kings when Knit has queen 9? Now, he says this because we've been talking about combos and the hands that Knit was putting Bertelsen on, including pairs from 9s to kings, and we had said there were not 30 combos of that. We were wrong, of course, because with the queen and the 9 in Knit's hand, that knocks the combos down. So we made that mistake.
Good catch.
Yeah, really nice catch, Gray Face No Space. Our mistake, for sure. Finally, Very Alive WOW.
All right.
I've heard of that person before.
Wow.
All right. He says, while I kind of agree with your reasoning to check behind on the flop, you didn't consider what would happen if Bertelsen decided to do so. Checking back the flop would mean that he can only ever have one hand that is not folding to a double barrel from Knit, pocket rockets.
I disagree with this pretty much wholeheartedly. And we did consider what would happen if he decided to do so. It would be kind of a figure it out spot. See if Knit bets, and if he does, maybe sometimes call him down and sometimes don't.
Yeah, I mean, the point is when you bet, you define Knit's hand pretty much to an ace or nothing, right? Like pretty much to a hand that's beating you or that you're crushing, but every time he calls, he's ahead, you would think. Anyway,
you would think, that's not what happened.
Right, because it's such an extraordinary and strange play.
Yeah.
But as you can see, it worked out that way because Bertelsen folded, right? By checking, you actually leave Knit's range undefined, which means he can be betting with all his bluffs still. He shouldn't really have any bluffs, although he happens to in this case. So you don't just have to have rockets here. You can absolutely have queens, you can have jacks, you can have a bunch of stuff.
You can have a lot of stuff, and really this all should go back to what are we trying to accomplish when we're betting with queens? We're not really folding out anything that we want to fold.
Yeah.
We're only folding out hands that we're beating, and we're getting called by all of the better hands for sure. Knit would have moved in with kings, so it's not like we're bluffing kings.
I mean, I think it's bluff insurance, meaning he's like betting the 700,000 on the flop so that way Knit doesn't bluff him later. But even that didn't work. That's supposed to work, but even that didn't
did not work at all. And now he is the victim of one of the coolest plays in internet history.
Yeah, and Knit won the high roller too.
Yeah, good for him.